Nobody tells you when they start avoiding you. That's the part that makes it so disorienting. There's no conversation, no explanation, no moment where someone looks you in the eye and says, "Here's what changed." They just slowly become less available. Responses get shorter, plans get cancelled more often than they get kept. And you're left doing the one thing that almost never produces a useful answer, trying to figure out what you did wrong based on nothing but silence. Carl Jung spent decades studying the gap between how people experience themselves and how they actually come across to others, and what he found is genuinely uncomfortable. The reasons people drift away are almost never the reasons the person being avoided would guess. The obvious things, rudeness, cruelty, a specific incident, are rarely what does it. It's usually something quieter, something the other person couldn't even fully articulate if they tried, something operating below the level of conscious awareness on both sides. So here's what I want from you right now, before we get into the 3 reasons. Think of someone who quietly drifted from you, not a dramatic falling out, not a fight, just a slow fade that you never fully got an explanation for. Hold that situation in your head, because I think by the end of this video, you might understand it in a way you couldn't before. And here's the thing I want to plant right at the start, because it's going to pay off later, and I don't want you to miss it when it does. All 3 reasons we're going to cover today share one underlying thread, one single thing, and it's not what you'd expect from a video with this title. I'll name it at the end, but see if you can spot it yourself as we go through each one. Let's get into it. Reason 1. You make people feel unseen without knowing it. Here's something Jung would point to immediately, and it's subtle enough that most people completely miss it in themselves. There's a difference between being present in a conversation and actually making the other person feel like they exist in it. Most people in most conversations are doing something very specific without realizing it. They're listening just enough to find the entry point for their own response. The other person is still talking, and already, somewhere in the background, the listener's mind has located something to say, a related experience, an opinion, a question that redirects the conversation towards something they find more interesting. They don't experience this as selfishness. From the inside, it feels like engagement, like connecting, like being part of the conversation. But here's what the other person experiences. They finish a thought, or sometimes don't even finish it, and suddenly the conversation has moved. Whatever they were saying got acknowledged just enough to serve as a launch pad for something else, and they're left with the faint, hard-to-name feeling that they weren't really heard. Not that they were interrupted exactly, not that they were dismissed exactly, just that the moment they were trying to share dissolved a little faster than it should have, replaced by something that centered the other person instead. Jung would identify this as a failure of what he called genuine encounter, the capacity to fully meet another person in their experience, rather than simply using the interaction as a surface off which to project your own. It sounds abstract, but the practical reality is very concrete. People remember, at a feeling level even when they can't articulate it at a thought level, the conversations where they felt genuinely seen versus the ones where they felt like a supporting character in someone else's monologue. And over time, without ever consciously deciding to, they tend to seek out less of the second kind. Picture a man named Adrian, smart, warm, genuinely well-intentioned. He loves conversation. His friends would tell you he talks a lot, not in a way that feels hostile, just in a way that takes up most of the available space in any given exchange. He asks questions, but they're usually questions that happen to lead toward topics he finds interesting. He listens, but there's always a slight hum of impatience when the other person's story goes somewhere he's less engaged by. He has no idea any of this is happening. He genuinely believes he's a good conversationalist, because from his vantage point, the conversations are lively and interesting. He doesn't notice that they're lively and interesting primarily from his end. Over time, one by one, friends become slightly less available. Not unreachable, they're still friendly when they see him. But the spontaneous, "Hey, want to grab coffee?" invitations come less frequently, and he can never quite figure out why. Nobody has said anything. Nobody has had a conversation with him about it. They've just quietly recalibrated how much of their relational energy they're willing to invest in an interaction that consistently leaves them feeling like they showed up, mostly to be an audience. Reason 2. You leak anxiety into the people around you. This one is going to land differently than the first, and I want you to sit with it honestly, rather than reaching immediately for reasons why it doesn't apply to you. Every person carries a kind of emotional weather, a baseline atmosphere that the people around them pick up, mostly unconsciously, within the first few minutes of being in their presence. Some people carry calm. Being around them is settling in a way you might not even consciously notice until you leave and realize you feel better than you did when you arrived. Other people carry a more unsettled energy, not bad, not hostile, just restless, braced, slightly on edge, and being around them is subtly draining in a way that's also hard to name, because nothing specific happened, and yet you leave feeling slightly hollower than when you came. Jung would describe this in terms of the unconscious communication that happens between people below the level of words. We are far more porous to each other's emotional states than we consciously recognize. A person running high anxiety, even if they never mention it, even if they're smiling, even if the conversation stays light, that anxiety transmits. It shows up in the pace of speech, in the quality of listening, in a slight over-intensity that doesn't quite match the lightness of whatever topic is being discussed, and the people nearby pick it up, also without consciously recognizing it, and their nervous systems register a faint but real cost to being in that presence. The strange thing is how invisible this is to the person doing it. They often have a clear, articulate narrative about themselves as someone who handles things well, doesn't burden people, keeps their worries to themselves. And on the level of words, that's completely accurate. They don't complain, they don't vent, they don't ask for emotional support explicitly. But the body doesn't lie the way words can. The slight tension in the jaw, the way a laugh is a half-second too quick, the way silence in a conversation gets filled just a fraction too fast, all of it broadcasts continuously to anyone nearby who's paying the kind of attention people pay without knowing they're paying it. Here's the dramatic part, and I mean this genuinely. Most people who do this are not anxious people in a dramatic sense. They don't describe themselves as anxious. They're not visibly panicked or outwardly tense. The anxiety is quieter. It lives in a constant low-level scanning of the environment for potential problems, a habit of anticipating what might go wrong, a faint but persistent need for reassurance that often shows up as asking the same kinds of questions on repeat or checking in slightly more often than the situation actually calls for, or interpreting neutral silence as potentially meaningful in a worrying way. Picture a woman named Sasha who texts her friends first thing in the morning, checks in by afternoon if she hasn't heard back, and reads careful meaning into the time it takes someone to reply. She's not demanding. She never says anything outright about it, never expresses frustration directly. But the texture of interacting with Sasha carries a faint but real sense of weight, a feeling that the other person is always slightly on the clock, always quietly accountable for managing Sasha's internal state by being reliably, promptly available. Over time, friends start experiencing a small but real resistance when Sasha's name lights up their phone, not because they don't like her, because interacting with her has quietly become a task that requires something from them that they didn't realize they were signing up to give indefinitely. Jung would trace this back to what he called an insufficiently developed sense of the self as a stable container for its own experience. Someone who has developed that internal stability doesn't need the external environment to be consistently responsive in order to feel okay. They can sit with unanswered texts, cancelled plans, and neutral silences without those things becoming signals that require urgent interpretation or management. Someone who hasn't developed that stability yet outsources the job to the people around them, usually without ever intending to, and the people around them eventually, quietly, make themselves a little harder to reach. Reason 3. You present a version of yourself that doesn't match your energy. This one is the strangest of the three, and it's the one Jung would find the most interesting, so stay with me here because it's worth taking slowly. Most of us have learned through years of social conditioning that certain presentations are more acceptable than others. Positive is better than negative. Confident is better than uncertain. Easygoing is better than intense. And so, to varying degrees, most of us have developed a gap between what's actually running underneath and what we present at the surface. This isn't lying exactly. It's the persona, Jung's term for the social mask each of us builds to navigate the world. The version of ourselves we've learned is most likely to be well received. The problem isn't having a persona. Everyone has one, and it serves a real function. The problem comes when the gap between the persona and what's actually happening underneath gets wide enough that other people can feel the inconsistency, even when they can't name it. Here's what this actually looks like. You're at a gathering, you say all the right things, you smile at the right moments, you're agreeable and pleasant and present. But somewhere underneath you're bored, or you're annoyed about something unrelated, or you're sad, or you're running quiet contempt for aspects of the situation you'd never say out loud. You think the mask is holding. And in terms of the specific words coming out of your mouth, it is. But people are not only listening to words. They're reading micro-expressions, tone, timing, the quality of your attention, the slight misalignment between what you're saying and the energy behind it. And their nervous systems register the inconsistency even when their conscious minds can't name it. What they experience consciously is something much simpler and much more confusing. Something feels slightly off about this person, and I'm not sure what. That's the whole experience from their side. Not, I can tell they're faking, not a specific objection, just a faint but persistent sense of static, a feeling that what's on the surface and what's underneath don't quite match. Over time, people who consistently produce this experience in others tend to get avoided in a specific way, not coldly, not with hostility, just with a gradual reduction in how much intimacy gets offered. People will still be friendly in group settings, but the deeper one-on-one conversations, the ones that require genuine vulnerability and genuine trust, will quietly stop being offered. Because at some level, the other person has registered that something in the interaction isn't fully safe to relax into, even though they couldn't tell you exactly what or why. Picture a man named James who is relentlessly upbeat in every social situation, never complains, always fine, always good, thanks, how are you, even when he is quite clearly not good. His friends appreciate the positivity on the surface, but over time they notice something they can't quite articulate. Conversations with James never go very deep. Whenever the conversation moves toward anything genuinely personal or emotionally real, something in James subtly deflects, pivots, lightens the mood, moves the topic somewhere safer. His friends start to notice, at a feeling level, that James doesn't fully show up. That the version of James they interact with is consistent and pleasant, but somehow doesn't feel like an actual, complete person you can have a real conversation with. And gradually, without ever deciding to, they stop offering the deeper conversations at all, because the history of those conversations being subtly deflected has trained them unconsciously not to expect a real landing. Okay, so here's what I said at the start I'd name at the end. All three reasons: making people feel unseen, leaking anxiety into the room, presenting a self that doesn't match your energy, share one underlying thing. They're all ways of being not quite fully present, not as a moral failing, not as a character defect, but as a gap between the self that shows up and the full reality of another person across from you, or the full reality of your own experience in the moment, or both simultaneously. Genuine presence in Jung's model means two things at once: fully inhabiting your own experience without leaking it unmanaged onto the people around you, and fully registering another person's experience as real and worth meeting, both at the same time. That's harder than it sounds. It requires enough internal stability that you're not using the other person to regulate yourself, and enough genuine curiosity about the other person that the interaction isn't primarily about managing how you come across. Most people, most of the time, are only partially there, and other people feel that partiality, mostly below the level of words, and respond to it over time by quietly redistributing their relational investment toward places where they feel more fully met. The reason nobody tells you when this is happening is partly social. It's genuinely hard to say to someone, "I feel like you're not fully here when we're together," especially when nothing specific has happened that you could point to. But it's also something deeper. Most people can't articulate what they're experiencing because the whole thing operates below the level of conscious thought. They just know that certain interactions leave them feeling full and others leave them feeling faintly empty, and they gradually seek out more of the first kind without ever sitting down and making a decision about it, which means the feedback, when it does come, almost never comes directly. It comes as a slow fade, as decreasing availability, as warmth in the moment but no follow-through afterward, and you're left, as you were at the very start of this video, trying to figure out what you did, unable to locate the incident that doesn't exist, because the thing that shifted was never an incident. It was a feeling, accumulated quietly over time, that you weren't quite all the way there. Now go back to that slow fade you were holding at the start, the person who drifted without explaining why. Looking at these three reasons, not which one applies to them, but which one might have applied to you in that dynamic, does anything look different than it did 20 minutes ago? Tell me honestly in the comments. Which of these three actually made you go quiet about yourself, even for a second? Not the one that reminded you of someone else, the one that briefly felt uncomfortably close to home. If this gave you something to sit with, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.